Hi, I had a dream last night about Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart and I were, were having a couple of glasses of wine and were arguing about who is the best boat handler. And he thought he was, and I thought I was, or at least I thought he wasn't, let's put it that way. So he suggested that we go out on the river to do some boat handling and see who is the best boat handler. I said, don't be daft, Rod, you can't go out on the river after you've been having some drinks, it's just a stupid thing to do. Then I woke up to get a glass of water. And then when I went back to bed, I was still, in principle, my mind was still captured by the dream. And I recognized that this process where your mind is captured by something, and of course it's a dream, so it's a fantasy, right? That's akin to how depression develops. Because with depression, we develop a story and we practice and elaborate that story. We tell that story to ourselves over time. And sometimes circumstances make the story feel stronger, and sometimes circumstances make the story feel weaker. I've never met Rod Stewart, and I doubt he has a boat, but I was really struck with the elaborated nature of the dream, right? There are images, there are sensations, there's snippets of conversation, there's kind of experiences, if you like. And that's what the fantasy of depression is like for you, to some degree. You'll have a number of stories that you tell yourself, but they all focus on this idea of loss and lack, of underestimating yourself and overestimating your faults and failings. Now, I'm not suggesting that depression is created by dreams. I'm just using it as an analogy, really, to suggest that your mind is captured by the stories that you tell yourself. And these stories, through practice, come to feel more true, or they come to feel true. In principle, you believe them. And they don't have to be attached to facts. They simply are what you believe. Now, we swim in a sea of stories. The story of Brexit, the story of no Brexit, the story of the value of coronavirus lockdown, the story of the lack of value in the coronavirus lockdown, the story of taking anti-malarial tablets to prevent getting coronavirus, the story that taking anti-malaria tablets is dangerous for your health. We're always living in stories. And the stories we believe are the ones that fit most with our internal reality, with the things that we believe about ourselves, about how the world works, and about what we anticipate our future to be like. And actually, what we believe does not have to be attached to facts at all. So, for instance, the people who are pushing Brexit were pushing the story of Brexit. The people who were anti-Brexit were pushing the story of anti-Brexit. Both had some facts on their sides, but what matters is who's able to push and promote the story, who's able to make that story top of the news feed, in a sense. So the government say that they're using the science to manage coronavirus, but they're not really. They're using elements of science because there isn't the science. There's many scientific studies and there's many scientific advisors. But what they're really doing is they're selling the story of using the science. So once you start to develop a depressing story about yourself, your brain then selects information from external and internal reality that matches that story. So in a sense, you're attaching, you're collecting things that match the story that you tell yourself, a bit like a magnet collects iron filings, until you have a strong, quite pervasive story about yourself. But it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that you believe it. Because what you believe, as far as you're concerned, is what's true, irrespective of whether it's actually true. And that's the thing that we have to tackle with depression. We have to recognize, we have to develop a position where we recognize, I believe this, even though it's not true. Now, a bit of you, of course, believes it's true, but also a bit of you is puzzled. Because how can you believe you're a failure if you're successful at lots of things? How can you believe that you're weak when you do so many things? How can you believe that you're a bad person or that people don't like you when you have friends and people actually seek you out? So there's a bit of you that believes this depressing narrative, and that bit of you gets stronger or weaker depending, but there's also a bit of you that's attached to external reality, and you recognize that these things that you believe about yourself are wrong, but you just don't have a tool or a mechanism or a framework to adequately challenge them. And that's, of course, what you do with self-help CBT. You challenge this story that you've told you about yourself. The more you tell it, the more true it feels, even though it's not true. The more you tell it, the less relevant the external facts sort of seem, right? Yeah, but I'm a bad person. Well, how have I got friends? Well, because they don't know what I'm really like. I feel a failure. Well, how come you're successful at many things? Yeah, because, well, I'm a fraud. I just get away with it. I'm lucky. Okay, so you do workarounds. But what we have to do is we have to significantly, seriously challenge this internal story that you tell yourself. Because I have to say, telling yourself a story which is self-defeating in so many ways is really just counterproductive, right? It's just not going to enhance your life. And by the way, there's not going to be one story, there's going to be a number of stories, but nevertheless, these stories are amenable to be changed and they're open to the challenge. That's why CBT works so well for depression, because once you put some effort into challenging these stories that you tell yourself, they do get diminished and they do subside. And if you keep pushing these stories down, they go down and down and down, and there's no reason why you can't be free of depression. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.